Welcome to the Bright Ideas Podcast.
When we look at SEO campaigns and you look at the length of time it takes to get SEO results, there's things you have to factor in. And let me give everyone a bit of a summary of things that I look at when I look at speed of results. So the first thing is, how long has the website been up? If it's a brand new domain, if it has no history, it's just naturally going to take a long time for Google to trust it. Yeah. And if you think about that, that's just like anyone actually in business. If you have a new business and you walk into a room and nobody knows you and you're trying to sell something, it's just not going to happen, right? You kind of have to go to that event multiple times. You have to get to know people. You have to have sit down coffees. You kind of need to talk rubbish and talk about Netflix and let people into your family and all of those things for people to trust you. Similar with Google. You start a brand new website, it's just not going to happen on day one. Now, with this particular client, I've already described, they've been doing paid advertising for years. They've got thousands of products. They've actually been operating online for many, many years. When I see that, that's almost like gold for me. It's great, amazing. The other thing is, so that's the first thing. The next thing that we started to look at was the domain authority of a website. And people wondering, what's domain authority? Here's the concept. Again, let's just use that as same example. You walk into a room you're new in business. You walk into a room and people are going, wait, does this person really know what they're talking about? How many years of experience have they got? Like, where's that experience come from? It's actually very, very similar when it comes to Google and trying to grow the rankings. Google's business is built on the ability to choose the best possible answer, right? So what it needs to be able to do is find websites that it highly trusts so it can show that result to the person that's searching it. Yep. So again, brand new website's just not going to happen on day one. But because this website's been there for years, it's got the history check mark, right? It's ticked that box, which is awesome. Now, the other thing it's looking at is who else trusts this brand? So, for instance, Trent's speaking to me here. Now, if Trent recommends our company to his friend and says, hey, I trust Neil, you should go work with them, his friend is now going to trust me a lot higher. So what Google's doing, if we take that same example, what Google's going is, it's going, what other websites online trusts this brand? If there's a website that I already trust this new brand, then the domain authority of that new website or that brand is going to be a lot higher than a brand new site that no one else trusts. So,
and those, just to be clear so the audience understands this, those votes of trust are essentially links, right?
It's exactly links. Exactly. Okay. So in practical terms, what that means is if I have, let's say, the BBC, which is a well-known news organization in the UK and globally. If I have the BBC talk about me, like that from a domain authority is insane. I will physically drop out of my chair if that ever happened. I'm still working on it. And so that's what Google's doing. It's going, who else is linking to this brand? And if it sees a ton of sites, high quality sites, this is the key, high quality sites and sites it already trusts, linking to the brand, then the domain authority of that website is higher than a site that has very little links, right? So when we looked at my client, they actually had, because they had naturally been in business for a very long time, they'd been trying to grow their brand, hustling, right? They've been doing paid advertising. Over the years, if you've just been around online for a number of years, naturally you're just going to be in different places. Yeah. Even directories count to an extent. So the domain authority of this site was actually okay. It was decent. We weren't starting from scratch, right? So we've talked about two things here. We talk about from a technical perspective, making sure your door is open to Google. We talked about domain authority, and then the third thing that we look at is has the site actually actively thought about their content from an SEO perspective? And when we looked at this client, they hadn't done any of that. They had very simply looked at the content from a paid ads perspective, i.e., if I drive a click from this ad to that landing page, will they buy with the content? Yes, fine. That's as far as they had considered. Whereas when you look at it from an SEO perspective, you look at the actual words, you look at the copy, and you say, has this been optimized for Google? Right. And has this been optimized? And when we say, has this been optimized for Google, what I actually mean is, has this been optimized for someone searching on Google? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the answer to that question was no. So here's the situation I've got. I've got a site that actually somewhat is trusted, right, by Google. I've got a site that that hasn't opened its doors to Google at all, right? And I have a site that hasn't really thought about any of the content from a Google and an SEO perspective. And so what that means, that's a really good recipe. And the other one was, it has a lot of history. It's been around for a number of years. And so that's a great recipe for a site that when they start thinking about SEO, actually those results can be fairly quickly, especially with a site that's got hundreds of pages, thousands of products, because it's a fairly large site. So that's basically what we were dealing with. Does all of that make sense? You followed me?
Makes perfect sense. So now let's dive into the tactics. What actions did you start to take to change the site's ranking in Google?
Okay, so let's look at things in our control. That's where we start, all the time. So there's two things in our control. One is the phrase is technical SEO, but I will explain what that means in a very non-boring way for those that have gone, technical SEO, I'm about to lose sleep here. I will not put you to sleep, I promise. And the second thing is optimizing the content for SEO. So technical SEO, simple terms, is keep opening up your doors to Google. What does that actually mean? It means going through the back end of the site, looking at the technical issues. So some technical issue examples could be 404 pages, right? Where a site is ranking, or a site has too many 404 pages that actually just need to be cleaned up. And so what is the goal of technical SEO? It's very simple. It's almost like having a house with kids. You clean your house on day one, and in 7 days' time, if you've got kids, I've got two, your house is just going to be a mess, right? It's just going to be an entire mess. You can't even walk anywhere. In fact, if you put a blindfold on, you'll probably trip up and endanger yourself. That's what happens to sites that don't take care of themselves, basically. A site that doesn't look after itself, just over time, gathers junk, gathers mess. What does that mess look like? It looks like pages that were deleted but were not redirected, 404. What else does it look like? It looks like pages that were deleted and then forgotten about, and they're just lost in the ether. Or it was pages that were redirected, but actually they were deleted and now they need to be redirected, which causes redirect chains. Now,
basically what you're talking about here is just running a broken link report. You can use a tool like Ahrefs or SEMrush to run that report and find all these broken links. Is that more or less what you're describing?
Broken links is only one portion of it. There can be tens and tens of issues. So other issues could be meta issues, meta tag issues. You could have architectural issues. You could have indexation issues. I guess what I'm describing here is not something that someone can go. You can go into Ahrefs, you can go to SEMrush, and you can go run a report. We use Screaming Frog as well, which is a crawler, where you can crawl sites and see the issues. Actually identifying issues is one thing. Resolving it strategically is a whole nother thing. So when it comes to SEO, and we have a training program as well, when it comes to SEO, we're not it especially if you're running a business or you're a marketeer, I would say it's not in your interest to learn technical SEO, because once you've fixed it, it's one of those things, it's foundational, it's fixed, it's done, and then you can move on with your life. And just like you clean a house every week or every couple of days, just maintain your website every 6 months, every year, right? Run a technical audit, fix your issues. The examples I've given you are things that people can think about, but there are a ton of issues that we can find. If it's a small e-com shop, actually, you might be able to get away with it yourself. But my advice would be, when it comes to technical SEO, get someone good. If you don't have someone in-house, just get a freelancer, get someone else to run a one-off audit, speak to us, whoever. But your time is better spent doing technical SEO right, because there are a number of considerations. So that's the technical SEO part. That's the let Google in. And coming back to this example, when we ran the audit and we found their issues and we found everything that was going wrong, the main issues that we found, I actually reviewed some of the analysis before this interview just to make it as specific as possible. We found a number of redirect chains. Basically, it was slowing down the site. And it's just confusing Google. It's using crawl budget. It's telling Google to go down there when actually you should go down there. Like, you just want to optimize Google's experience, and you optimize Google's experience, you optimize user experience. That was one thing. The other thing is the site, because it had hundreds, actually thousands of products, it was indexing pages that were duplicates. So you also want to avoid that. You want to avoid having duplicate products, especially for e-com stores. And the best way to get around that is to do canonical tags, where you're telling Google that the actual real version, or not the real version, but the master version of the product is on this page, and I am a child version, so don't index me. So these are the things you want to consider when you're building out your e-com store. Avoid duplicate product listing. Now, the other thing in our control, this is the second point that we worked on, and it does lead on to duplication, is content, optimizing your content for your users and SEO.